Hello, my name is Brian Almon, editor of the Gem State Chronicle. I recently had the opportunity to sit down with Secretary of State Phil McGrane to talk about what his office is doing to prepare for this year's upcoming elections. The Secretary's office works in conjunction with all 44 of Idaho's counties to ensure that elections are run properly, transparently, and securely. The filing period for candidates for federal, statewide, legislative, or judicial offices opens on Monday, February 23rd, and closes on Friday, February 27th. That's 1 week. Prospective candidates will be able to use the new online filing system instead of having to come down in person to turn in their paperwork at the Capitol. Candidates for local, county, and precinct committeeman races can file between Monday, March 2nd, and Friday, March 13th. That's 2 weeks. The primary election itself is on Tuesday, May 19th. For more information, visit voteidaho.gov. Now, let's hear from Secretary McGrane. Secretary of State Phil McGrane, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
So we have an election coming up. What's your office doing to prepare?
This is like one of the busiest times for our office. So we are gearing up for the May 19th primary. This is the busiest part for the Secretary of State's office because we're getting everything ready for candidate filing. One of the big things that we've got rolling out this year is online candidate filing for all offices. So right now, in addition to getting all that set up and ready to go, we're doing all the trainings for the county clerks. So our team will be starting traveling next week around the state to do trainings in different parts of the state, get everybody ready, getting all the filing materials, and just issuing directives and other things that are preparation. And at the end of candidate filing, we end up kind of basically passing the baton to the county clerks. That's when they start doing all the work, and we get a little bit of a reprieve before we get to election day, and then kind of they'll pass them all back to us.
So this year you have online filing coming up.
Yes.
What has been the barrier to doing that online in the past, and what has changed now?
You know, one of the big things in the 2024 cycle, we did it for the first time. We kind of had a home-built system, and we did it for legislative races. So not everybody could file online. Now we're doing it so that we can do it not just for this election, but all elections, so local elections and others. It really just eases the process. It was remarkable to see in 2024 when we did it for legislators. Historically, there's been like a really long line out in front of the Secretary of State's office, both at the beginning and then at the end. The last day used to be very chaotic because so many filers will come at the same time. It's usually either the early risers want to make it known that they're running, and so they do it on day one, or you'd have people wait, and it just was a cumbersome process. But also with that, if let's say you're running for District 1, it meant you somehow either needed to get here to the Capitol building and file here in the building, despite living all the way up in the panhandle of Idaho, or mail your stuff in and ensure that the Postal Service got it to us in time. Online candidate filing completely changed that. One, we didn't have any lines at any point. The only line we maybe had was people wanting to take a picture with me to show that they had filed. You've seen those online, right? Everyone going through. But what was really cool too is, like any other online service, most people filed it like in the evening, or at times that we wouldn't even think of. There was never really a bottleneck, and actually most filers filed early instead of waiting to the last minute because everyone could keep track of what was happening and people could see. We had very few filers at the very end, which makes it a lot easier for us and ensures we don't have some of the challenges that the office has had in the past about people filing either for the wrong thing or not being qualified or something else. We can validate all their qualifications.
I remember a certain candidate for the Democratic primary for governor.
Shelby Rungstad will not be forgotten. Yes, you should probably be a member of the party you're running for, to say the very least. It's very much burned in our brain. And one of the cool things about our new system for online candidate filing that this didn't exist before is when candidates go to file, they'll actually look themselves up in the voter file. And so that will determine what they're eligible to run for. So you don't even have to know what district. We're going to tell you what district you're in. And so then you can select what legislative seat. We're going to make sure you're the right age, all the different qualifications. The system's going to verify that. We could double check on the back side of it, but we'll be doing it in real time. Just kind of like we almost do this already with voter information when people register. We're now just treating candidates the same way.
Do you think this will lead to an increase in people filing for office, just since it's so easy, there's less of a barrier?
I don't know if it'll lead to an increase. This barrier is modest compared to the burdens of running for public office. There's a lot with putting your name on the ballot. But for those who do, especially in where I look at it is you look at Idaho County. So Idaho County is the largest county geographically in the United States. And so particularly when we start looking at local elections. Say you want to run for county clerk or assessor or something, you might have to drive all the way to Grangeville just to file. Now you can just do it at the convenience of your home. Where I think that we'll see the most appreciation for it, though, will be precinct committee races. I think you know this well. There's people all gathering out, and like the easier we can make that process, it just streamlines it for everybody. In the past, we would always have like stacks of precinct committee filings come into the Ada County Clerk's office. Now we can kind of distribute that out and make it a little simpler, both for the filer and for the county clerks.
What was the reasoning for separating the filing period into two sections?
We did a big change. So actually, the county clerks led an effort to align all the dates. It's called a dates and deadlines bill to just make it more consistent between the off-year elections on the even-numbered year elections and the odd-numbered year elections. There was a bunch of that. It was actually not the clerks or the secretary's office that made the two different dates. If it was my preference, they would all be aligned because it's kind of confusing for us to communicate. But there was members of the House who wanted to see that different. The argument, as I understand it, was just when candidate filing happens here during the legislative session, it creates a little bit of angst and fervor, and that just occupies legislative time and space. And so I think their idea was to shorten it so it would occupy less time and space. If this is going to be an experiment, we have never done it this way before. I'm sure we're going to have county people who can't file because they're on the wrong week and vice versa. My hope is that we don't end up with anyone thinking the filing date is later and just missing the opportunity to file if they're intending to run. So we're going to be leading a lot of efforts to communicate not only with current office holders, but anybody out in the public who's interested in running.
Well, that's why we're doing things like this to get the word out.
Get the word out.
People who want to participate in our republic to make sure you file at the right time.
Exactly. And I think it's an important, what you just said. I was on a call earlier today about a sheriff's race that will happen in the state coming up. And one of the things is this is a republic. This is how we select our elected leaders to make all the decisions you're covering in the state house right now. This is the part of the process where we select those people who are going to make those decisions. And so it really is an important part of the process to make sure people are qualified, that people can get their names on the ballot. Because in our office, we see every walk of life come through interested in running, and that's part of the American experiment.
One issue that we've had in the past few years is mostly on one side of the aisle, but sometimes on the other as well, where somebody would file, win the primary, and then they'd see who's on the other side and then withdraw and replace them with a ringer.
Sure.
And that, of course, capped off with that attempt to switch candidates over to District 11. As I understand it, the law has been tightened up now. What happens if somebody withdraws after the primary?
If someone withdraws after the primary, there still is the process for withdrawal, because that can happen, as well as like somebody being deceased or something else. One of the specific things is that the party of the nominee should be selecting who's in that role. There was a snafu with District 11 last time. We've certainly learned a lot of the lessons based on that. I know that it has been tightened up. We don't see where we're watching right now in terms of the gaming. I'll just call it that because I think that's a fair assessment of it. Is even looking at candidates filing and then withdrawing before the primary election, because we'll see that too, where you have 4 candidates for office, people trying to talk someone out before they run. So trying to look at that, but the parties will still be the ones selecting who ultimately. It's an important part of this process is that the primary election is the nomination selection for the political parties, and I don't think that should be lost in terms of headed into the actual election is in November.
The online filing does take away from the strategery of standing outside your office watching as people come in at the last minute.
You would think it takes away from it, but I will say we had it last time and we still had people watching outside the office. My favorite is, I won't name them, there might even be somebody who will view this, somebody who was like calling us at 4:30. They had submitted a filing, they're waiting to see if someone else was going to, and they just intentionally didn't pay the filing fee. So ultimately we would void their filing, but it was that we still see the same strategies of gaming who's going to be the one filing or not. I don't doubt that will happen again this year.
Just from a purely political junkie perspective.
Yes.
It's fun to watch.
It's entertaining. And it's funny here because my favorite was in that situation, like someone called like anonymously and we recognize the voice of our anonymous person very easily because the political junkies, we all know each other in this space. So it's pretty funny.
So you've been keeping busy lately. Where were you bowling?
Last week, one of the coolest experiences I've had. I've had a few cool ones. I did get to go to the White House and go bowling in the Truman Bowling Alley. I was with Jared Borg. He's part of the Intergovernmental Affairs team for President Trump. and we hung out, and it was 7 secretaries of state all bowling together. And it was just an amazing experience. Like, and what was cool too is like, yes, it was political, it was all Republicans, but at the same time, like, we weren't focused on work. We were just having a good time. And little did most people, when I say it, not only is it ridiculous to say that I was bowling in the White House, most people are like, wait, there's a bowling alley at the White House? And sure enough, there is.
Do you remember what your score was?
Yes, I do, very vividly. It was 134 because my first 2 rounds, I only hit 1 pin, and Jared is undefeated, and I almost beat him. He beat me just at the very end, and I wish I had, because then I know I would have been invited back just so he could beat me, right? And so hopefully, maybe someday I'll have that opportunity again. But it was a remarkable experience.
Well, it sounds like you have all sorts of interesting experiences in this office, running elections, managing a lot of data, and getting to go bowl in the White House.
It is one of the things I'll say. I knew a lot about this job coming in because I'd worked at the county before and been in elections for a really long time. But there are parts of the job that I just didn't envision. One is I've been to DC way more times than I could have imagined this last year. Whether that's working on the SAVE database with USCIS, meeting with White House officials or other secretaries. Thankfully, there are some fun stories along the way. Some of it is just work, like going and doing things or testifying. But between St. Patrick's Day and bowling, those are, I will say, my absolute highlights.
Cool. Well, I know you've got to run, so I appreciate your time.
Thank you. And, I'm sure we'll be talking more. Encourage people to vote. May 19th is a very important election. You know this, I do. Primaries are what really determines so much in our state. So hopefully we'll have really good turnout this May.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.